Well, we're going to get started. So the first portion of fitness today is actually going to be focusing a little bit on orientation and mobility. It's going to be talking about sighted guide. A lot of us, I know, have probably learned what sighted guide is and what you're supposed to do as the unsighted individual. But what I want to talk about is how to describe to somebody else what you need in case you feel, in a way, uncomfortable telling them exactly what you need as an unsighted individual to be guided around. There's ways that you can sound kind and not very rude about it, like, don't do that, or I don't like that. There's ways around trying to describe the best way to go about guiding you as an individual if you are in a public place needing help. The first one is, if you're looking for help, just asking someone, saying, excuse me, is there anybody around that can help me around, let's just say, the grocery store? Making sure that you're not just standing in the middle of nowhere, trying to find the nearest wall with your cane or somewhere that you can be against so you feel like you're out of the way, and then just say, excuse me, is there anybody around that is willing to help me or that could help me around this grocery store? Depending on where you're at, it's always different. So then when the person comes up, hello, what can I help you with? Or if they come up and just grab your arm, the best way is to say, excuse me, do you mind not holding my arm or grabbing it? I'm going to show you how I'd rather be guided. Instead of just kind of like pulling away or going, don't do that, we're going to change it into going, listen, I appreciate you trying to help, but there's a better way to guide me, and I would appreciate it if I would be guided the way that I want to be guided. So I'll show you. And then next, you're going to go through the step-to-step process of explaining to them what you need. So you're going to tell them, the first thing that I'm going to do is I would like the back of your hand on the back of my hand, and then I'm going to guide my hand up your forearm and place my hand in a C, like I'm holding a cup above your elbow. The best way is to describe what you're doing so the person doesn't really feel uncomfortable, because you are technically grazing their arm, so that can get a little bit uncomfortable. So making sure you're describing what you do before you do it, the same way that you would want them to describe what they're doing before they go and touch you or grab you or whatever. The next thing is let them know, just make sure while we're walking around not to grab me, pull, or push me in any direction. I can't see, so I don't know what you're doing, so please describe to me everything that's around or anything that you're doing prior to doing it. And then make sure they greet you, let them know that, like, hey, this is my name, what's your name? So you know who's guiding you, because you want to be able to talk to them on a little bit of a better level than just a random person. Letting them know that once you are in that C holding position above their elbow, you're going to be about a half a step behind them. And the way that your bodies are going to be is about a body and a half length wide. So you're a half a step behind and about a body and a half length wide. This is going to help you stay in line with them, go the same direction, and get the most feedback. So let them know that the reason that you're doing what you're doing is so you can get the most feedback while you're walking. Next, you're going to be walking around. Now, grocery stores don't necessarily have stairs, so we'll go back to the stair thing, and we'll talk a little bit about malls as well. So if you guys are walking around the grocery store, there may be narrow passageways. So if you're walking and the person just kind of tries to turn or let you know, like, hey, it's pretty tight here, be like, all right, if you don't mind, just bring your arm behind your back, in the middle of your back, and I can just slide down on your wrist. to be able to fit through the narrow passageway, because then we'll become one person rather than two, and I won't have to worry about stepping on your ankles. So just letting them know, as we're walking, if it gets narrow, bring your arm to the center of your back, and I will slide my hand down to your wrist, and then you can guide me that way. Once we're through the narrow passageway, just bring your arm up next to you. That goes for the same as going through doors, small hallways, if it's a crowded area and you need to fit through, if there's a lot of people around, that's another way to use that as well. If they mention to you that you are going to be walking through a doorway, if we walk through a doorway, can you just let me know if the door is coming towards me, going away from me, and what side of the body the door is on, if it's on my left, if it's on my right. So if the door is coming towards you, just say, the door is opening towards you on your left. So just making sure they give you these small details. And if they don't, and if they just happen to open the door, you can just kindly ask, excuse me, I don't know what side the door is on. Do you mind telling me what side of my body the door is and which direction it's going? Just saying it in a nice way, trying not to be rude about it, because you don't want to make people feel uncomfortable like they're doing something wrong. Just letting them know that you just need these simple facts that they may not realize as a sighted individual. Next, if you were to need to leave, or they needed to walk away from you for a second, let's just say, hey, do you mind grabbing me some like 3 peppers? You don't need to go with them if they were going to grab you 3 decent peppers. Of course, when you go to the produce section, it's going to be really hard as a visually impaired or blind individual to really see if the pepper is good or not. You can typically, got a call. You can typically tell when you are holding a pepper if it feels good or not, but sometimes you can't see if there's anything wrong with it, or if there's mold on it. So if the person were to go over there to go grab your pepper, be like, hey, can you make sure you put me against a wall or along one of the produce kiosks just while you walk away, and just let me know that you're walking away every time you do, and not just leaving me in the middle of nowhere. And then you can come back. So just making sure they never leave you in the middle of nowhere, because that can get a little scary. And then now we're gonna, sorry, I lost my train of thought. So also, those are like those basic grocery store needs. There's also walking with a cart. That can get really weird. I know a lot of people have some issues with what's the best way to go about walking around the grocery store with a cart. So what I have found to be the best method is, as the visually impaired blind individual, you are actually going to be pushing the cart or just holding where the handle is on the cart. The sighted individual is going to be holding either the side or the front of the cart and sort of guiding the cart. They're not going to be pulling it. They're going to be guiding the cart. So they'll be able to tell you which direction to go. And you can kind of tell if they were to kind of slow you down and push the cart back a little bit, you'll know to slow down. So you're actually going to be pushing the cart yourself. And it gives you a little bit more of a feeling of independence. So if you were to be in a grocery store, even with someone you know, a spouse, a friend, a significant other, like your child, cousin, parent, you just let them know, hey, can I push the cart? All I need you to do is grab onto the side or the front and guide it. So you're just going to be making sure I'm going in the correct direction. Kind of like when a kid is riding a bike without training wheels for the first time. They're basically doing all the work with the pedals. You're just guiding them to make sure they don't tip over one way or the other. So that's going to be your best bet when you're using a cart. If they need to get through a narrow passageway, all they need to do is go towards the front of the cart and stand in the front, because most areas are wide enough to fit 2 carts. So all they have to do is just go in the front of the cart and guide it that way. but make sure they don't pull it, because that takes away your independence. You want to feel as independent as possible when you're out grocery shopping or doing anything. So making sure that that independence is always there. And if you're pushing a cart, you don't need your cane out. I've told people that having a cane out while you're in the grocery store isn't necessary, just because that cart is actually gonna hit pretty much any obstacle, anything that's not above your head or at head length, head height. That's going to stop you from hitting your head, but that's going to stop every obstacle in your path. So just knowing that, like, that is going to be very similar to a cane, so you don't need to worry about any obstacle in your way, but also the sighted guide would hopefully tell you that those things are in your way. Now, let's move on to being in a shopping mall. So if we were in a mall and we were being guided, there are escalators, there are stairs, there's sometimes ramps, everything under the sun. You never know what you're going to get in a mall. They're all different. So if you were to go to stairs and the person that's sighted were to just walk to stairs and just start going, hey, there's stairs right here, and just keep going, let them know, hey, hold on a second. Do you mind explaining to me what kind of stairs there are? Is there a handrail? I'd really like to know these things, because it's important for me to know what I'm doing and the area that I'm in. So having them tell you that there are handrails, if there's, some people like to know the approximate amount of stairs just so they're aware of when they might be getting to the bottom. And then knowing if the stairs are going up or if they're going down. That's also a really important thing to know, because you don't want to just start trying to go upstairs. Letting them know also when they get to stairs to stop and give yourself a second to get yourself prepared and know where the edge of the step is. And then as they're going down the stairs, be like, okay, I'm descending or ascending those stairs now. And then right before you reach the bottom, just say, hey, we got one step left. There are people that actually don't need to know that. They just naturally know, like the way their sighted guide is walking, they know that they're at the bottom of the stairs, or if the sighted guide just stops, they know that they have one more step. So there are things out there that some people get used to and they don't need to know that. But if you're with somebody that you've never walked with before, you're going to need to know these little tiny details as you're walking. So a couple more things that you want to kind of talk about when you're doing sighted guide or getting led is inform them that they don't need to be in a elbow bent position. They don't need to be tight or having their elbow bent in like a sling position. Let them know they can keep their arm relaxed at their side, because it actually gives you more feedback when they're like that rather than stiff. If they are on the shorter end and you're a little bit taller, you can put your hand on their shoulder. It does still give you similar feedback as an elbow would. It's not the best, but if you are a little taller, rather than kind of yanking their side up or down too much, that will give you the ability to be able to get a similar feedback. So just putting your hand on their shoulder. It's not offensive to ask for description while you're walking around. Just be like, hey, do you mind if you just let me know what's around as we're walking? Because it's important as an individual to know if you were ever to go back there with your cane, you would want to know where you're at. So being able to understand where you're going in space and time is going to be really important if you ever need to walk that way ever again by yourself. And then also, if you're walking out and about in the world, just let them know, hey, if you're shorter than me, how tall are you? Because I'm this height, and if there are hanging branches or anything at the height of my forehead, I could hit it and you couldn't. So just make sure you know to tell me that there are branches. It's not bad to just let them know, because a lot of people who are sighted see blind and visually impaired individuals and they're not really sure what to do. They just look at you and are very, very confused. So giving them as much detail as possible is actually going to make them feel a lot more comfortable and okay, rather than uncomfortable. So don't be afraid to voice information, spit out details about your visual impairment. Let them know that, hey, listen, I know that a lot of people think that I'm completely blind, but I can see a little bit. Not enough to do this by myself. So take that opportunity while they're guiding you to give them the details that anyone would need to know as a sighted individual about the blind and visually impaired community. Last thing, if you are walking and they were to say, hey, there's this really cool looking building to your left, it's about 5 stories high, a thing that they can do is drawing on your hand. A lot of times if I'm doing a route or I'm trying to describe something to them and how it looks, they can use their fingertip and draw the picture on your hand of how it looks. So the outline of it, if it's a circle, that kind of thing, or they can actually take your wrist and as you're pointing with your finger, they can trace your hand along the outer side of the entire building. So you can get a better picture of how large the building is, what it looks like, what it is in comparison to other buildings. So if you do that quite often, you're going to start getting a feel for what everything looks and feels like based off of how you're tracing it. So that's a really great method to know what a building looks like, is by someone tracing, using your finger to trace the outside of the building. All right, any questions on sighted guide, human guide, detailed description when you're walking? I don't see anything. All right, awesome. So that is my O&M tip for this session. And now we're going to move on to some yoga and strengthening the core. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why it's important to have strength in the core. As individuals who are walking a lot, our mobility and our ability to stay balanced is going to be critical while you're walking. So if you were to walk over the side of a curb, your core is actually going to be what's keeping you very balanced and could actually catch you in your fall. Now, if you have weak ankles, sometimes that can throw things off, but having that strong core is what's going to keep you mostly balanced. It's going to help you walk a little bit straighter because you're going to have a better structure built, and you're going to feel stronger as you're walking and have the ability to walk a little bit further. Because what's in your core is actually most of your organs. So as you're strengthening that core, everything inside of your core area, which is between your shoulders and your hips, is getting stronger as well. And it will cause less lower back pain. And that is a major thing as people age. Your lower back to mid back really starts hurting. So if you do exercises that are going to strengthen that core, that pain is going to slowly decrease as time goes on. Your core is the structure and the base of your entire body. It's the same way as a building. The cement structure that's below the building is what's holding it up and making sure that that building isn't going to fall into the dirt or start collapsing. So it's the same way with your core. It's what helps you stay up straight, stay erect, and your spine, like I've talked about prior in other sessions, is that it keeps your spine straight and aligned, and it'll help you stay balanced, which is what you want. And some people are unbalanced, and that's okay, but this is going to help you feel a little bit more balanced. So the first thing that I want to do is in a seated position. This is the best way that if you have trouble sitting on the floor or being on the ground and getting back up, this is going to help you be able to do some sort of exercise in a chair. It's also something that you can do while you're on the couch, or if you're in the office and you're just sitting in a chair. Here's some exercises that you can do while you're sitting in a chair so you can actually exercise while you're at work. So I'm going to grab my ottoman. Now, this is a little bit lower than a chair, but it's still the same thing regardless of what you're sitting in, as long as you are elevated off the ground. So what I'm gonna do is my backside is at the edge of my seat. So I have just about 5 inches, no, probably 7 or 8 inches of my backside on the chair. And then I'm going to put my legs straight out so just my heels are on the floor. And then my hands are going to be planted or holding the seat to keep myself balanced. And then I'm going to sit straight up. So making sure that that spine is straight up. You're not slouched. You're not over leaning back or anything. You're straight up and down. So your shoulders are stacked over top of your hips. Then what you're going to do is you're going to bring one knee towards your chest. So you're just going to bring that one leg up towards your chest area and then back out. And you're just going to tuck it in and back out. So you're bringing your knee towards your chest and then putting it back towards the floor. If you want to make it a little bit harder, you can bring your leg straight up out in front of you. So your leg is parallel with the floor. And then you can drive that knee towards your chest and then bring it back out. You're going to actually feel some burning in your hip and quad because it's working that as well. So that motion is actually working that core and that leg area and that hip. So if you're sitting in a chair and you're at work, you can do that. If that feels too simple for you, you can do both legs at the same time. So those heels are on the floor and those legs are straight out. And then what you're going to do, this time you're actually going to need to lean back a little bit or put your hands on the outside of your chair rather than the front. And then you're going to bring your knees up towards your chest and then back down to the floor. And then drive those knees up to your chest and then back down to the floor. So that way you are actually using your core to drive your knees up towards your body and then bringing them back down to the floor. The slower you go, the harder it's going to be. And if you bring your feet back down to the floor rather than touching your heels, if you just let them hover and not actually touch them back on the ground, you're going to keep that constant tension going in your core. So even if I were to just hover my feet over the floor as I'm sitting in my chair, I'm going to feel that tension. As you can hear, my voice as I hold it changes a little bit because I'm really tightening my core area just to lift my legs up. So that's one exercise that you can do in a chair that is really good for your core. Do it in the office. You can do it on the couch. That's what I love about that exercise. Another thing that you can do, actually just laying in bed. So no excuses. So I'm going to stay on my ottoman just to show you this way what you can do. So it's all going to be lower half. So if my legs were straight out in front of me and I'm laying on a bed, so what I can do is all I'm going to do is I'm going to lift my legs straight up in the air. So now my heels are above my hips. So they're going from being parallel with the bed to being completely up towards the sky. And my heels and my legs are now at the same, are stacked above my hips, but my back and my backside are still on the bed. So I'm just lifting my legs straight up and then bringing them back down. If you can't do both at the same time, totally fine. You can just lift one leg up and then bring it slowly back down. And if you want to keep that constant tension the whole time that you're doing that core exercise, you can keep that left foot, if that's the one that's the one leg that you're lifting up, hovering over. Sorry, I keep getting calls. If you keep that left foot hovered, it's actually going to cause a lot more tension on that abs, and it's going to keep the core working constantly rather than giving it a break. Any questions regarding those two exercises so far? Okay. Awesome. So I'm going to move my ottoman, and now we're going to move to doing some stuff on the floor. So I'm going to go over your basic crunch. I'm going to move my phone down. All right. So for the basic crunch, I'm sitting on the floor and my legs are at a 90-degree angle. They're bent and my feet are planted on the ground completely at about hip width apart. So normally we've done everything at shoulder width. Now my feet are going to be hip width apart. And I'm going to lay my back flat on the ground. And then all I'm going to do is, if you can't sit completely up, like you're getting out of bed, that's no problem at all. You can either just try to get your shoulder blades. So you're going to crunch to lift your shoulder blades off the ground while everything between your feet, your knees are bent, your backside, and your entire back is still on the ground other than your shoulder blades. So you're just going to lift that part of your body up and then bring it back down. If you can go a little bit more advanced, you can actually use your hands to grab your thighs and pull your body up to give you a little bit of assistance to be able to sit all the way up. So that's one way to modify a crunch or a sit-up, to get all the way up into that upright position. While you're sitting up, the best way to sit up to keep that best tension in your abs is to not curl your body. So you're not slouching. You're trying to keep your back as flat as possible as you're sitting up. So if you were to bring a pole from laying on the floor to upright, you're not going to be able to bend the pole in order to sit it up straight. The pole is going to stay flat exactly how it is. So you want to keep your back the same way that a pole is, as flat as possible, and then coming straight to an upright position. And the best way to know is if when you come up, if your back isn't arched and your shoulders aren't slouched and they're straight up and down, stacked on top of each other, you'll know that you sat up in the best position possible. And then the slower you go down, the more tension you're going to create on your abs the whole way down. So I'm going to go over that one more time. So for a sit-up, your feet are going to be planted firmly on the floor. My knees are bent. My heels are about a foot to a foot and a half away from my backside. My backside all the way up to my head are going to be on the ground. In order to sit up to get that exercise, all I'm going to do is I'm going to rise like I'm getting out of bed. The best way to get the most tension out of this exercise is to keep your spine from bending forward or backward at all. So you don't want to lift with your chest, you want to lift with your core. So it's almost like you're driving your belly button up towards your knees, not your chest to your knees. If you need a modification, you can use your hands and slowly use your hands to pull your body up to the upright position, or you can just do a couple where you're just lifting your shoulder blades off the floor and you're holding that position. So you're actually going to keep that tension. So as I come up with lifting my shoulder blades off the floor, I'm holding that position to keep that tension in my abs or my core area. And then you're going to come back down. And the best way to do those crunches is to not drive your chin to your chest. It's to keep your head looking straight up and down towards the sky. So any sort of sit-up, you don't want to bring your chin to your chest, trying to keep it completely in line the same way that we have been working on this whole time. So the next thing is in a standing position. I'm going to go on my knees just to make sure that I'm still completely in the camera. This is something you can do with either weights. You can use a bag, your purse, your briefcase, anything that has a little bit of weight to it. You can hold it in your hand. So you would be standing up and the weight would or whatever you want to carry, or if nothing at all, that's totally fine, is going to be in your hand. For the purposes of this exercise, I'm going to just say your right hand, I'm holding the weight. My left hand is on my hip, so my arm is bent. I kind of look like a teapot right now, like I'm about to sing the I'm a Little Teapot song. And then all you're going to do is you're going to reach your right hand down towards your feet, and then you're going to come back up. So it's like a side crunch. The weight is now going to pull your body down to your right side, all the way down, and then you're going to lift that weight up using your abs. Don't use your back, don't lift forward. We're leaning to the side. So our hand is going down the side of our leg, possibly to our knee or below, and then we're lifting straight back up. This exercise is going to work those side muscles along your rib cage and to your hips. So you're going to feel that on the outside of your body and possibly in a little bit of your back. So let's do the left side. So the weight would go in your left hand, or you don't have to do a weight at all. And you're going to dip your body down towards the outside. So my left hand is going down my left side of my body as far down as I can reach without tilting my hips too far to the right. So you want to keep those hips as still as possible. So you're reaching down and then coming right back up, and then reaching down to your knee or as far down as you can go without moving your hips, and then crunching and pulling that weight back up towards the perfectly in line position. So that's going to be a standing side crunch. That way you don't, that's another exercise that you can do without having to lay on the floor. If you have trouble laying on the floor, or it's just good to do regularly as any individual who can sit, stand, do anything. It's a really good exercise to work that outside hip area, what some people call the muffin top. It works that area. The last thing that I'm going to do is we did a ab exercise on the chair that you lifted legs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to do a more advanced version on the floor. Because a bed does have that little bit of a squishy feel to it on your body. So that could actually cause a little bit of ease on everything. So it makes it a little bit easier. So for this one, I'm going to lay on the floor flat. So my body is completely laying flat on the floor like I'm laying in a bed. What I'm going to do is I'm going to place my hands under my backside, so my palms are on the floor and the back part of my hands are touching my backside. And then I'm going to hover my feet above the ground. Wherever you want to put your feet without your back arching. So if your feet need to be at 2 feet above the floor, if they need to be 6 feet above the, not 6 feet, sorry, 2 feet or 3 feet above the floor, that's where you can put them without your back having too much of an arch off the ground. So you want to keep your spine as flat on the ground as possible. So you're going to hover those feet above the floor. I have my head up just to be able to talk. You can hear my voice shaking a little bit. My feet are about 6 inches above the ground. You can lay your head flat if that's more comfortable for you, but just so I can talk, my head is up. It does create a little bit more tension on the rest of my body. And then you're just going to hold it there. And that's going to create a lot of tension in your abdomen muscles. Another way that you can also do this exercise is by lifting one leg up. So if you want to do the one on the floor and you can't hold both feet up off the floor, you can just hold one foot off the floor and then hold it wherever you feel the most tension. And then you're going to press your spine flat on the floor as far down as it can possibly go. So you're driving that spine towards the floor. So that's what you're going to do in order to get that most out of the exercise that you can. If you want to make this hovering a little bit more advanced than just holding your feet at 6 inches, you can do scissors. So what I'm doing is I'm lifting my left foot as my right foot is still hovering, and then I'm going to switch so my left foot comes down and my right foot goes up. And I'm just switching like my feet are doing a scissor with each other. And that's really going to work that core area, and it's going to give a little bit mobility in those hips. So those are a couple exercises that you can do. I'm going to quickly review what we talked about today, just for all those that may have came in a little bit later, or if you forgot, just sitting here and listening to me talk the whole time. So the first thing we talked about today was sighted guide. We went through the basic steps of explaining to somebody what we can do, explain to someone what they need to do in order to guide us around as visually impaired or blind individuals. Explaining to them the best way to safely walk us around and most comfortably walk us around. Making sure that we're keeping our language at a kind and not direct tone, so the person doesn't feel uncomfortable or feels like you're yelling at them. Trying to keep a kind of more informative tone rather than a angry, all-knowing voice. The next thing we went over is a ab exercise where we're sitting in a chair that you can do in the office or while you're on the couch. It's just lifting your legs off the floor and bringing them back down. Your hands are going to be on your chair the whole time, holding your body in an upright position, and then driving those feet up to a parallel position to the floor, and then your heels are going to go back down to the ground. If you want to make it a little bit more difficult, you can keep those heels hovered off the floor and then just keep lifting your legs up and down off the floor to a parallel position all the way down to hovering over the floor. The next thing we talked about is the lying in the bed. The last exercise we just did, you can also do it lying in your bed or lying on the couch. You can hover your feet about 6 inches above the bed, and you can do that same ab exercise. It actually creates a little bit more ease and a little bit more structure on your lower and upper back. And I guess also you're laying in your bed, so you don't have an excuse to not do abs ever or work that core. So while you're laying in bed, you can just lift those feet slightly off the bed and then back down. You can also bring them straight up to the sky and then bring them back down to the bed, and doing kind of an up and down structure the same way that we did in the chair. We then talked about crunches. So laying on the floor with your knees bent, feet flat on the ground, and everything from your backside all the way up to your head is laying on the ground. And then you're going to sit straight up, trying to keep your back as flat as possible. And you're sitting straight up and then going back down. If you need modification, you can grab the back part of your legs and pull yourself up to get yourself in that upright position and to keep that back as flat as possible, like a pole, and you're not arching your back anyway. And if you cannot sit up at all, totally fine. All you need to do is crunch your body up where your shoulder blades are just slightly lifted off the ground. Another thing we did talk about is this standing side crunch. So you're either holding a weight or you're not holding a weight, and you are reaching down towards the floor using your hand, sliding it down the outside of your body, and then crunching your body back up. The hand that is not holding the weight, or the one that is not reaching to the floor, is on your hips, in a little teapot position. And then the last thing that we just went over was the 6 inches or the hovering legs over the ground, where you can either do scissors, you can do kind of both legs up and down at the same time, or you can just hold your feet at 6 inches, 1 foot, 2 feet, whatever's most comfortable, without letting the whole entire spine lift off the ground. So you want to make sure that that spine is pressed on the ground as flat as possible. So those are the exercises we went over. The whole point of learning core and strengthening your core is to keep that balance in your body and making sure that everything is working properly, because we all need a good structure in order to move the best way that our bodies can. Less falls. It will cause a lot of less falls because we have that structure in our body and we won't trip and fall as much. So when you think about a structure, if it's done properly, there's a lot less cracks in the foundation. So if you look at a floor and there's cracks, there's maybe a sidewalk that comes up a little bit over the other. That's because of poor structure, or things were not being held correctly. So making sure that that structure is completely flat and working at its best so we can stay balanced and we will fall less. And then you can actually get less lower back pain and mid back pain just from doing these core exercises.